They vanished in 2002. Two hikers from a bluebird morning, swallowed by a storm. Families mourned. The mountain went quiet. The case went cold. But 22 years later, their names reappeared in a summit register. Same date, same minute, two different hands. A club that never meets. A fair book that wasn't fair. A ranger with tidy consonants. A boy who kept a page. A witness who still hears the shout. This is the story of Mount Sparrow, of Rory Hart and Nika Paredes. The book that lied, and the people who made it tell the truth. If you're drawn to long-form, emotionally immersive true crime stories, subscribe. September 3rd, 2024. Location, Mount Sparrow, Summit Register Box, San Juan National Forest, Colorado. The box lived in the wind. Pine pitch mended its seams where the lid met the little brass hasp, and 1,000 wet gloves had polished the grain to the color of old tea. Jessa Lake ran her fingers along the top edge, counting the rusted tacks she'd cataloged in photos the night before. 7 on the hinge side, 8 on the lid. One new bright tack glinting where no bright tack had been last summer. She did not open boxes lightly anymore, not after years of doing this. The podcast, the documentary work, the interviews where grief made rooms smell like dried flowers and dust-warmed plastic. But a stranger's late-night DM, you're the only one who will check, had nested under her ribs and would not leave. She opened the register. The paper rasped. Someone had flipped this book many times, then very recently. Pages still bowed where a wet glove palmed them. The last page bore a neat line of entries in pencil. A family of 4 with a doodled goat. 2 college kids who wrote the altitude wrong. A solo hiker armed with a smiley face and an exclamation point. And then, Rory Hart Nika Paredes, August 27th, 2024, 2:41 p.m. Jessa's mouth went dry. She knew those names in the way a county knows its unfinished stories. Memorial Day weekend, 2002. A bluebird morning, a forecast that soured at noon. They'd set out fast and light, promised parents they'd text a summit selfie by 3. The phone never pinged. The search ran 5 days until sleet chewed visibility down to nothing and the sheriff called it. No bodies, no packouts. The mountain kept its own. She flipped back 1 page. The paper had that oily graphite sheen of recent pressure. 2 lines up, in a different hand. Slanted, rounded, almost pretty. Nika Paredes, Rory Hart. August 27th, 2024, 2:41 p.m. Same date, same time, same names, different order, different hand. Her stomach tightened, not from altitude. Someone wanted this to be seen. 2 entries, 2 styles, like the correction marks she'd learned to spot in case files and court exhibits. She took photos, angle, macro, a scale shot with a ruler, and another of the tack that didn't match the old pattern. She pressed a blank page lightly over the entries and shaded with the side of her pencil. The ghost of strokes rose up, pressure points darker, hesitation marks blooming where a hand had hovered. The wind combed the ridgegrass flat. To the north, the knife of Sparrow's east arête cast a clean-edged shadow into half a cirque. Glacier scoured and empty as an old bowl. A raven croaked once, lazy and satisfied. Jessa breathed the thinness until it chilled the heat behind her eyes. "Hart and Paredes," she said aloud to no one. "Who put you back here?" She had seen it once before, in a different decade, on a different mountain. Twin Needle Peak, 1986. 2 backpackers who never made camp. A register page that reappeared at the ranger station with their names written in after the fact. The old ranger's handwriting had been tidy as ledger columns. He swore the page had been misfiled and then found. He swore a lot of things. She turned a page, and something caught in the corner. A very faint indentation before the first signature, like a test line, the shape of the letter R practiced once just off the margin, where no one would look. Jessa closed the book. She replaced it in the box. She slid the hasp down. The mountain looked the same as it had yesterday and as it would tomorrow, which was the kind of lie mountains loved most. Back at the trailhead, her rental's doors thunked like a heartbeat. She held her phone in both hands and texted the runner who'd sent the photos, a woman named Mara, whose avatar showed a sunburned grin and tape on both knees. Jessa, photos match. I'm in. Meet me at Miller's Diner at 6. Bring the original shots and tell me exactly how you found them. 3 dots. Then, Mara, I didn't find them. I went up to erase something. I changed my mind. Erase what? Jessa started to ask, then didn't. The question could live for 1 more hour without her. On the road down, Aspen spent their light like coins, flash, 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 through the windshield. She passed the turnout where the Hart Paredes search had staged 22 summers ago. She could still picture the tents, the map spread across the hood of a county truck, the bright coils of rope. Even then, before her podcast and the film crews and the midnight edits, she'd liked the way investigation felt in the body. Head down, hands working, a single question tucked like a hot stone in a pocket. Now the question had 2 signatures, and one of them didn't belong to the mountain. September 3rd, 2024. Evening location. Miller's Diner, Durango, Colorado. Miller's smelled like coffee and floors that had known 1,000 mops. The booths were red vinyl and had formed cracks at the seams, perfect for catching sugar grains and secrets. Jessa always chose the corner that let her watch both the door and the parking lot. A habit, not paranoia. Habits were what you had when paranoia finally ran out of fuel. Mara arrived in a gray hoodie the color of thunderheads. Stringy blonde hair in a messy knot, gait a little stiff. Runner's knees that had made unwise promises to mountains and paid on the installment plan. She slid into the booth and kept a hand on her phone like it might bolt. "You're Jessa Lake," she said, not like a fan, like a person reading a warning label. "I listened to the Glacier Ridge series, twice. Then you know I ask rude questions and I check everything you tell me." "Good." Mara sat back. "Ask. How'd you know the Hart and Paredes names were in the register before you ever reached out?" Mara stared at her spoon the way people did when trying to decide how much of themselves a sentence could carry without tearing. "I saw a post in a private group," she said finally. "People who run 14ers and 13ers. Someone put a photo of the page up in there and asked, what the hell? It got deleted quick. Admin said we don't court drama. I screenshotted it. Who posted?" Handle was Blue Blaze. She rolled her eyes. "Cute." Jessa wrote it down. "And you went up to erase?" "Not their names." Mara's mouth tightened like she'd bitten a lemon seed. "Mine." The waitress poured coffee and slid over pie like a blessing dropped off in passing. Jessa waited. Mara pulled her phone closer. On the lock screen, a summit photo, knees in taped bands, hands on a register box. "Back in July," she said, "I signed a summit book on Eldora Needle. Didn't think anything of it. A week later, I get a DM from a guy asking why I'd forged my partner's name. I didn't. He sends me a photo of the entry, same date, same time, but the second signature is neat, like a librarian's, not like the trash my partner, ex-partner, scribbles. I figured it was a prank, but then Hart and Paredes. Yeah." Mara wiped her palm down her jeans. "I went up to Sparrow because I didn't like that my name was in a book next to something fake. I thought, if they forged mine, maybe they'd forge theirs too. I was going to pull the page, rip it out, throw it to the wind. And when I got there, I couldn't." Her voice dried. "The mountain is not a filing cabinet. You don't just—" She cut herself off. "So I took photos and left it. That's when I messaged you." "Who knew you were going up?" "No one. I told work I had a dentist appointment." "I don't have dental." Jessa smiled without warmth. Everyone who lies for a hike uses medical. Classic Mara tried to smile back, failed. Do you think this is one person? The forging, the double writing? I think someone with access and a conscience that has learned to step lightly is doing something they call correcting, Jessa said. And I've seen it before. She told Mara about Twin Needle, about the tidy ranger with ledger handwriting and a mind that turned facts like screws until they fit the hole. Hal Benton. She'd interviewed him once, on his porch in Pagosa Springs, when his lungs were already losing the climb. He'd been charming like a grandfather who taught you knots, and forgot to mention the time he let a kid spend a night above tree line because it saved money by keeping the helicopter grounded. He's still alive? Mara asked. Barely by the time I got there. Died 2 weeks later. The last thing he said about the registers was, "The books are bones." He didn't mean it poetically. What did he mean? That every mountain keeps a skeleton, but the paper ones can be rearranged. Mara shivered like the AC had found her spine. So what do we do? We start with chain of custody, Jessa said. Who brings books down? Who stores them? Who has keys for the summit boxes? Who replaces tacks and uses a new tack that doesn't match old ones? She slid her phone across. Photos of the hinge seam, the bright tack. New hardware means new habit. Someone was up there recently who doesn't know this box's history. Mara's gaze sharpened. Blue Blaze. Or someone older who changed tools. Jessa paid, left too much cash, and walked Mara out. The parking lot hummed with the low quiet of small towns after dinner, when the light is a slow pour and the only loud things are kids on bikes and memories with engines. She offered a hand and Mara shook it, hard, like she was making a deal with herself to finish something. As Jessa turned toward her car, a county truck rolled past. She knew the driver. Everyone who had learned to ask questions in the San Juans knew Owen Vale. District Ranger 2 decades deep, broad in the shoulders, unbothered by storms. He tipped 2 fingers off the wheel in a little salute that missed warmth by an inch. His passenger window was down. The wind flipped a corner of paper on his dash. A register page, maybe. Or a permit log. Or nothing at all. The truck rolled through the yellow and vanished. Jessa felt that old stone in her pocket again, the one question, heated by friction until it could brand. She took out her phone and opened her contacts. She still had a retired sergeant's number from the Hart Paredes search. She still had a printout of the chain of custody policy for trail registers. She still had Hal Benton's transcript, where a cough had drowned his vowels and left the consonants behind to scrape. She texted her producer only 3 words. Rolling on Sparrow. Back in her motel, she cleared the table and pinned the photos with painter's tape, the hinge, the tack, the 2 sets of names. She drew lines between them with thread. It looked like a small, clean web. They always did at the beginning. She let the recorder roll while she wrote her notes in longhand. It made better audio than you'd think. The rasp of pen on paper, a kind of small, honest weather. First theory, she said, we're dealing with a register cleaner. Someone who believes time should be fixed so families can rest. Second theory, someone covering a liability window. Third theory, a ritual, a way to live with guilt. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. A voice she knew came through anyway. Vale. No hello. Just. Don't take books off mountains, Miss Lake. The mountain hates that. He hung up. She hadn't said a word about taking anything. She stared at the phone until the last heat drained from her coffee and left it the color of old bronze. The recorder caught her whisper, whether she meant to say it or not. Who told you I was up there? May 25th to 31st, 2002. Location, San Juan County Search Base. The first volunteers remembered the taste of the storm more than its sound. Sleet has a metallic aftertaste, like a penny sucked too long behind your teeth. It laid that taste on the back of tongues and inside the folds of scarves. You could identify who had worked the Reappeared search years later at the grocery store in midsummer because they were the ones who shivered when the ice machine dumped. Jessa had copies of the original callouts. The faxed flyer with a grainy photo of two faces that could have been any two faces. Rory Hart, 27, a carpenter with forearms like worn rope, grin easy, eyes squinting against light. Nika Paredes, 25, grad student in ecology, hair braided tight under a ball cap, mouth arrowed toward laughter. Last seen May 26, 2002, at 6:12 a.m. Trailhead camera, white Subaru, plate 2, KP917. Planned route, standard sparrow ascent via lake in East Irete. Forecast then, clear until noon, possible convective build after. They had left a voicemail with Nika's mother at 2:14 p.m. We'll send the photo in a sec. Wind. Laughter under wind. A scrape of what might have been a pencil against wood. The phone never sent again. At 4:06 p.m., the ridge took weather like a wall catching a fist. By sunset, the air had teeth. Owen Vale had been younger then, not yet district ranger, just a man who could carry 30 extra pounds uphill without turning red. In the photos Jessa scanned on her bed, he looked like the cover of an old L.L. Bean catalog that someone had rolled and re-rolled in a pack lid. Creased, scuffed, uncomplicated. He stands behind a woman who has a map on a hood, finger on contour lines. He points once, not dramatically. The camera catches him at the end of a sentence. The search went in hard, then slogged slow. 3 dog teams caught nothing but 1,000 ghosts of old boots and marmot. Helicopter grounded day 3. On day 4, a team on the East Irete found a mitten with a braided cord like the one in Nika's photo. The cord had torn fibers at the edge where it had snagged. It lay in a scrape on sandstone, a scuff pattern heading up, then doubling, then vanishing. Double prints were a common kindness. Mountains played upon investigators. Wind makes dancers out of tracks. Base kept formal notes and informal lore. The formal notes were clean and full of nouns. The lore said what the paper could not, that on day 5 someone, no one, would sign whose. Saw a figure high on the arete at last light. Could have been a shadow. Could have been a boulder loosening. Could have been a person standing still to be seen and failing. At 8:32 p.m. on day 5, the sheriff ended ground search. Families gathered in a room that smelled like coffee and wet wool. The Hart family's pastor spoke about green pastures in a place where there were none. Nika's mother kept her hands in the belly of her sweater as if keeping a bird warm enough to live. A ranger with ledger handwriting noted, "Case suspended pending new evidence." Register policy in 2002 lived in a binder whose tabs had been replaced too many times. Summit books were to remain in place until full. When full, volunteer stewards, club-affiliated or ranger-designated, packed them down in a zip bag to be logged, then filed at the district office. No chain of custody beyond a sign-in sheet in a wooden drawer. If a book tore, it was replaced. If a page blew, it became airborne history. 3 months after the search, a hiker turned in a Ziploc with loose pages to the front desk at the ranger station. The top page showed a date, May 26, 2002. There, near the bottom, 2 names in pencil with the pressure of adrenaline, R. Hart and N. Paredes, 2:14. Owen Vale had initialed the intake log in blue ink. Hal Benton's tidy cursive recorded that the page would be filed with the rest. No one could prove where the page had been for 3 months or who had handled it. A year later, the same page appeared in a press packet when a documentary crew asked for B-roll. In that version of the story, the couple summited and died on descent. It made for a clean arc. It drained their last hours of every speculative horror. It also shifted liability. If you reach the summit, the narrative lets you take your own ending. Jessa lay on her motel bed at midnight with a fluorescent light humming like old bees and read the paper like prayer. She marked places where the script diverged from itself, Tiny fissures where the truth breathed. Vale's initials on the intake. Benton's note. The lack of chain of custody for loose pages. The motel heater clicked. Off, on, off, as if thinking. In the morning she sat across from a woman with the same eyes as Nika. Lydia Paredes boiled tea leaves until the kitchen smelled like grass and sun-baked clay, and grief that had learned a chair. She spoke softly. People always do. When they have told a story, enough times that loudness would make it mean less. She called, Lydia said. You've heard the recording? I have, Jessa said. Wind, laughter. She signed Summit books, Lydia said, then gave a small, apologetic shrug. She liked the ritual. We hiked when she was little. We wrote our names in dry places, and then the rain made them soft. It felt like being erased and remembered at once. Do you believe she reached the summit? Lydia turned the spoon in the small pot as if stirring a lake. I used to need that story to sleep. Then I realized I had made the story to sleep. I don't know what happened to my daughter. I know the mountain knows and will not tell me. If those names are up there again now, years later, someone wants me to sleep again. I don't trust it. Did anyone from the Forest Service or SAR ever talk to you about register pages appearing after the fact? One man. Her mouth flattened. Old. Nice handwriting like a teacher. He said the books get messy. He said sometimes a page wanders downhill on a breeze and a good soul catches it and brings it home. He made me want to make him a sandwich. Then I remembered I was starving. Hal Benton, again. Tidy, fatherly. Soothing, leaving the smallest footprint possible while moving the furniture in the dark. Before Jessa left, Lydia pressed something into her hand. A photocopy of Nika's field notebook, lists of alpine plants, small, precise sketches. A note at the bottom margin, time is weather's handwriting. Outside, clouds stacked rosy and innocent over the ridge. Summer's cruelty. On the way back to the trailhead, Jessa pulled off where the search base once stood. The ground remembered the generator scars and the weight of decisions. She got out and stood with her palms on the hood as if it were a pulpit. There are questions you speak aloud on purpose, to make them visible to whatever answers are out there circling. She said, if you fixed their names, what else did you fix? A truck slowed on the road. The driver lifted a hand. Not Vale. Another ranger, a kid with a beard like moss. He smiled like a person in a uniform who still believes jobs are shapes that fit bodies. You Jessa Lake, he called. My aunt says your show saved a kid once. No show has ever saved a kid, she said. People do. What's your name? Eddie. He pointed his chin toward the ridge. You hear someone pulled the Sparrow register last night? Her heart tapped the hood twice. Who? Don't know. I just got told to say if I saw anyone with a zip bag. He studied her face. You okay? Never, she said, and got back in the car. Her phone had no bars. The ridge breathed like an animal asleep and dreaming of a chase that never ends because that is the only dream mountains have. September 4th to 6th, 2024. Location, San Juan District Ranger Station. The station's lobby still had the mural of a cartoon trout leaping a cartoon waterfall. Jessa had once interviewed the artist, who told her she added a hidden outline of a boot print in the rocks. A joke for herself, a secret for kids. Secrets imprinted on places whether people meant them to or not. Public records, please, Jessa said at the front desk. Summit register chain of custody, Sparrow, last 5 years. Sign-out sheets for book retrieval. Contractor logs for box maintenance. Names of volunteer stewards. The clerk, a woman with a braid as long as good memory, did not blink. FOIA, if that's what it takes. The braid woman smiled. Or I can simply print what is public and put a note on the rest. She lowered her voice. Listen, Miss Lake, my cousin was on Glacier Ridge in 11. Your work matters. Paper is paper, but the mountain has other paper. She tapped the counter. Invisible pages. Jessa looked over the sign-out sheets at a table by the window. The Sparrow book had been retrieved twice in the last 2 years, both times by O'Vale. The hardware log, the tiny inventory kept by someone who cared, showed 1 box of brass tacks used on Sparrow in mid-August. Ordered by OVALE. The volunteer steward listed for Sparrow was a club unknown to her. Blue Blazes. She felt the tick that comes when threads stop pretending to be loose. She photographed everything, then asked for copies anyway because redundancy is not just safe. It's a superstition. On the wall behind the desk hung a shadow box with artifacts recovered over decades. A rusted tin cup, a harmonica missing its reed, a coil of waxed twine, a pencil stub chewed by a marmot because marmots were the original archivists. In the corner, under glass, a single page from the top of Twin Needle Peak, 1986. The tidy hand, the after-the-fact date. She asked for Hal Benton's retirement address out of habit, and because sometimes the dead leave more in their rooms than in their obituaries. The clerk hesitated, then slid a sticky note like a secret. His house is empty. The niece is selling. Be nice. She'll let you look at his notebooks if you don't say podcast in the first minute. Pagosa Springs at dusk smelled like rain that decided to sit and talk instead of fall. Benton's porch sagged under the weight of old chairs and newer dust. A woman in her 50s with a kindness that looked borrowed and well-kept opened the door. "You're the one who made Uncle Hal sound like a person," she said. "Not a saint, not a monster." "People make better radio," Jessa said. They sat on the porch, the way you sit when you want to be able to get up fast if the past stands up too. The niece brought out a milk crate of notebooks, field logs, incident reports, little wire-bound pads full of found phrases. Hal wrote like a man who believed in thin lines holding thick things. In a 1986 log, TN Peak, register torn, recovered by Club, filed by HB. A penciled margin note added later, smaller, like a voice leaning in. Bones are to be set. In a 1998 notebook, a list headed corrections. Wrong day, right names, TN. Wrong order, right day, Eldora. Initials only, fill later. Add time for weather, add time for weather. What a beautiful, cruel thought. Was he a bad man? The niece asked finally, the question people ask when they want to know if love must be returned to the store. He was a man who made a task out of silence, Jessa said, hearing the recorder in her own voice. He believed correcting the page could correct the story that hurt the living. He thought clean stories spare pain. She looked at the ridgeline, black lace against a sky gone bruise purple. He forgot that pain is also a form of truth. Back at Sparrow 2 mornings later, fog braided the ravine and laid itself across the ridge like a worn scarf. Jessa climbed before the day warmed because frost tells more than mud, and she needed to see where boots had been. At the last switchbacks, she stopped where the trail narrowed and looked down. A faint scuff on a quartz pebble, a slide mark where someone's pole had bitten, and very lightly, at shin height, a crease in willow branches where someone, had passed recently. At the top, the box's hasp wore a thin new scratch as if a key had argued with it. Inside, a clean book, only 3 pages marked since placement. The hardware was new brass. 1 tack shone brighter, set with a sideways slant different from the rest. Jessa photographed, unscrewed the box from its crossbeam with a driver she'd brought and permission she did not have, slid a thin mirror behind, and found what she had come to find, the imprint of a page torn and replaced. Tiny graphite shadows in the wood grain where a hard hand had pressed. "You don't have to take it down," someone said behind her. Jessa turned. Owen Vale stood 10 feet away, hat in hand, the morning light cutting his face into honest planes. He had climbed quietly. He had always moved like a man whose bones matched the slope. "Then stop replacing books without logging it," she said. He nodded in a way that acknowledged both truth and the impossibility of living with it. "Walk?" They moved along the ridge where the wind kept words short. He pointed out across the basin. I've pulled 4 people out of that bowl. I've zipped 2. The mountain is not a thing you beat. It's a thing you learn to ask. And what do you ask it when you write names that aren't yours? His jaw worked like a man chewing something too tough. Benton taught me what to do with noise, he said. The papers don't want maybes. Families don't want maybes. We set bones. Bones break again if you set them wrong. He stopped. Do you think I killed them? I think you killed a story that might have led to who did, she said. One thing I know about patterns. They don't form unless someone draws dots. He looked older then, not fragile, just something that let light through. You want my confession, Ms. Lake? Here it is. I put things where they should have been. I did it for weather, for children, for budgets that don't take helicopters after noon. If you need to cut that to sound righteous, cut it. I don't cut for righteousness, she said. Only for time. He exhaled a laugh that sounded like a cough. Here's a thing I didn't said. He pointed back at the box. The duplicate last week wasn't mine. Whose blue blazes? He smiled for real then. A club that never meets. He turned to go. Don't take the book, Miss Lake. Leave the bones on the hill. She watched him go until the fog erased the lower half of a man, and then the upper. And then it was just the mountain again, trying on the illusion that it had never had tenants. Jessa sat with her back against the crossbeam and let the recorder hear the wind. You can love a place that lied to you, she said, and still measure the length of the lie. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Service was a rumor up here, but occasionally a generous one. A text from an unknown number. You're looking at the wrong ledger. Attached, a photo. A summit register from 1986, Twin Needle Peak. Same tidy hand, same set bones loop to the S. But the names? Not backpackers. A pair of trail stewards. One of them, O Vale. September 6th, 2024. Location, San Juan Alpine Club Archive, Durango, Colorado. Basements hold the weather of paper. Down here the air had that cool, hung-back smell of paste and cardboard. The kind of air that teaches you to speak softer so the dust can keep sleeping. Jessa signed a spiral notebook labeled Visitors with a pen attached by string, and followed a volunteer named Dot past framed summit photos into the stacks. Dot Bianchi looked like a person who had once been a librarian and never stopped. Hair in a coil, sweater with elbow patches, eyes that filed everything you said into subjects and cross-references. We host copies of old registers if they make it down, she said, plus club journals, maps, and whatever the Forest Service doesn't want to keep tripping over. What do you call the copies? Jessa asked. Dot's smile thinned. Fair books. Jessa felt that click you get when a word reveals a door behind it. Who makes them fair? Whoever can still read the rain-streaked parts. Dot spread a hand. Stewards, rangers, club folks. Blue blazes. Dot paused by a rolling cart. I've heard the name, more rumor than roster. She leaned in. Folks think it's a club. It's a signature, a way to say, we did maintenance, without inviting phone calls, Shelves murmured. Dot pulled a banker's box labeled Sparrow, Reg. 1999 to 2005. She set it on a table, drew on cotton gloves like a priest before sacraments, and opened the lid. Inside, 2 bound volumes and a manila folder swollen with loose pages. The bound volume had a cloth tape spine. On the title leaf, in neat cursive, Mount Sparrow, fair copy. Assembled 2003, H. Benton. Jessa's own breath sounded too loud. She placed the book on foam rests and turned to the tab for May. There they were. Our Heart, North Paredes. 2:14 p.m. The pencil line looked clean here, not the halting pressure she'd seen on the loose page in the station's shadow box 5 counties ago. On the fair page, the 2 had a downward hook at the tail. Benton's 2s did that. The names, though, the loops belonged to no one in the photograph from the trailhead, to none of the letters Jessa had collected from families after, to nobody's Latinate R and N. It read like a classroom example of their names. "Can I see the original?" she asked. Dot nodded toward the folder. "Loose leaf. Watch the tears." She slid the folder open. Inside lay the same page Jessa had memorized in the station lobby. Thin paper, water-warped, graphite gone soft where pressure had been hard. In the margin, barely there, the ghost of a practice stroke. A capital R, then a nervous notch where the leg paused before crossing. Not in the fair copy. She photographed everything with scale and notes. If someone wanted to keep liability simple, she said, a fair book would be the place to do it. Dot watched her. "You think the books are part of the story. I think the books are a story." She kept turning pages, forward into June, July. Benton had annotated places where the original was illegible, in tidy brackets. 3 illegible names. Family of 4, Storm. On the inside back cover, someone had taped an index card. At the top, corrections. The list echoed the one in Benton's notebook she'd read on the porch. Wrong day, right names, wrong order, right day. Initials, fill later. Add time for weather. "Did Benton ever speak at the club?" Jessa asked lightly. "Twice," Dot said. "He liked metaphors, said registers were bones. You set them so they could heal. People clapped like they'd been told they were useful." A trolley rattled upstairs, voices crossing like lines on a topo map. Jessa turned one more page and stilled. Tucked under the back flyleaf was a paper strip cut from a photo envelope. On it, in blue ballpoint, a number, P.O. Box 441, Pagosa, and beneath, K.B. Dwyer. "Who's Dwyer?" she asked, knowing the name by feel already, the way you know the route you've walked in the dark. Dot's eyes moved the way a cat's do when it hears its own name 2 rooms away. "Kid. Not anymore. He did odd jobs, ran trailhead caches for the club in the late 90s and early aughts. Carried spare pencils, new books, bags. He had hands like someone who kept his pockets full." "Kellen," Dot nodded. "That's right. Disappeared from our rosters after 2003. People said school custodian, night shifts. People said he liked the quiet." Jessa wrote the P.O. box and slid the strip back where she found it. If Blue Blazes is a signature, not a club, someone decides when to use it. Dot's hands folded on the table, neat as resting birds. "I like books that keep what happened," she said. "I don't trust books that keep what should have happened." Jessa thanked her, left a donation, and walked out into a noon that had overspent its blue. She sat in her car and called Pagosa directory assistants like it was still 2004. The clerk sounded delighted to route anyone to any number. The system still believed calls were rescue lines. "Dwyer, Kellen B., Jessa said. "One listing," the clerk sang. "Mailbox on Main. No physical." Jessa changed course. On the way, she stopped at the post office and rented her own box. Habit, not paranoia. Habits were the boxes where future paranoia slept. When she asked about 441, the clerk shrugged and pointed down a row. Jessa slid her card into the general delivery slot and waited. The woman returned with a canvas tote full of mail. "He hasn't picked up in a bit," she said. "Do you know him?" "I know his handwriting," Jessa said. "And that might be enough." She copied return addresses. One leaped. Vale Timber and Trail. P.O. Box 19. Another, San Juan Alpine Club. A third, handwriting only, no return. Thin, careful loops. She put the tote back. Outside, thunder muttered a county away. The road to Sparrow went pale where lightning thought its thoughts. She texted Eddie, the beard like moss. "Who has keys to the Sparrow box besides you and Vale?" He replied faster than an altitude breath. "Old sets exist. Tried to collect them. Benton had extras. Some stewards never returned." She stood by her car a minute longer and let the sky cool her scalp. "You're looking at the wrong ledger," the text had said. In the basement, she had found a ledger that explained more than one clean story had permitted. The wrong ledger was the fair one. September 6th to 7th, 2024, night to morning. Location: Vale's Garage, County Road 18, Sparrow Trailhead Pullout. Vale's garage smelled like bar oil and mountain rain baked into canvas. The big door was up, the night coming in a wide, soft stripe. On the workbench, a cracked register box from some lesser summit, screws in a tray, a bag of brass tacks. In the corner, a shelf with labeled bins, hinges, hasps, graphite, zip bags. Jessa stood in the doorway and let her eyes map the rectangles of a life that had made order out of weather. He didn't turn when she said his name. He'd known she parked by the sound of her engine, the same way people who live on ridges can hear what kind of snow fell by the pitch of their boots. "You always leave your door up like that?" she asked. "You always walk into other people's rooms," he said, not unkindly. "Only when the rooms hold the bones." She nodded toward the register box. "You doing repairs for a club that never meets?" He wiped his hands on an old towel like he was finishing conversation with a different machine. "Someone has to replace what Wynn chews," he said. "Sit if you want." She didn't. "I saw the fair book, Owen. Benton's hand on top of other people's rough marks. Corrections pinned like butterflies. Better than letting pages turn to mush. Better than letting stories turn to mush," she said. "What does blue blazes mean when it appears on a sign-out sheet?" He untied the towel and folded it neat. "Sometimes it means we did a thing we didn't want to write our names under," he said. "Sometimes it means nothing." "Who's Kellen Dwyer?" "Kid from back when," he said too quickly, which meant he had been practicing not saying it. He carried water and pencils. He'd leave notes on trailheads telling people to pack their trash. He had a way of showing up right after a storm, like a person who knew when skies broke. He kept Benton's P.O. box on a strip in the fair book. Vale rubbed his brow with a thumb like an eraser. Kellen wanted to be useful. Benton gave him a job. Bring down books when they're full. Leave fresh ones. Don't forget the zip. And sometimes fix the story. Vale's mouth worked as if a word had a burr on it. "Benton had ideas," he said. "Right up until the end. Tell me about 2002. He flinched and hid it by reaching for the screws. "We searched 5 days. You know that. We found a mitten. We found scuffs that read like a fight and like a dance. We found enough cold to decide enough cold. 3 months later, a page appears. You initial intake. Why? Because that's what you do when a book page shows up," he said. "You log the object and put it where it can keep doing its job." And the job was to say they summited. His eyes went tired at the corners. "Ms. Lake, the job was to hold what they wrote. Did they write it?" Silence breathed. Somewhere a cricket remembered itself. Vale set the screw carefully back in the dish. "You think I wrote it?" he said. "I think you let it be written," she said. "And I think whoever wrote it needed that page to exist." He looked at her then with a kind of resignation she had seen in parents at morgues and in old rangers who know a frost heave by smell. "You want a villain," he said. "There isn't one. There are people who choose between worse and worse. I kept helicopters from flying in lightning. Benton kept phones from ringing at midnight with maybes. We all set bones and hope they hold." "Who sent the text with the photo of Twin Needle?" She pulled it up. His name in a ledger from 1986. A fair page listing stewards as summiteers. He didn't even look. "Someone who wants you to think the ledger is the story," he said. "It's not. It's a symptom." "Whose symptom?" She turned toward the shelf, the bin labeled graphite. The pencils were cut short, each in a Ziploc, each labeled with a summit code and date. Her chest pulled tight. "You keep the pencils." "As evidence," he said, defensive suddenly. "Graphite carries pressure. You can read a hand in the dent." "Benton's hand. If you already know your answer, why ask me?" He picked up the broken box like a shield. "Don't take the book, Ms. Lake." "You keep saying that." She stepped into the night, which makes me wonder what happens the night someone else does. He didn't stop her as she left. In the mirror, she watched him turn back to the workbench, a man rebuilding a small wooden mouth that had told lies and truths in equal, untraceable measures. At dawn, she was at the Sparrow pullout with coffee gone bitter and a coil of rope across the passenger seat, a habit. When a Subaru she recognized eased in, Mara climbed out, cradling something like it was alive and might run. A zip bag with a book inside. The Sparrow Register. Where? Jessa began. Mara's face was pale and raw as a scraped knee. I found a post last night, she said. Blue blaze again. Said the Sparrow bones were too visible and it was time to move them down. There was a map pin. I thought it was bait. I went anyway. It was just there. In a rock hollow below the ridge, under a flat stone. I took it before someone else could. Someone else like me. Someone else like whoever wrote those names last week, Mara said. I didn't want a second fair book before we even know what the first one is. Jessa scanned the lot. A white county truck rolled by and did not stop. She put the bag on her passenger seat and heard her own heart as if it were high altitude again. We need chain of custody, she said. Photos, video. You hand it to me on camera. Then I hand it to the district office and ask to log it with your name. Then I ask to see which hands sign when I am not there. Mara nodded. Game face over fear. And if they won't let you? They like laws. Jessa lifted the bag. I like light. They filmed the handoff quick and clean. When they pulled onto the county road, a truck fell in 2 cars back. Maybe coincidence. In this story, there were fewer and fewer of those. September 7th, 2024. Afternoon night. Location, Pagosa Springs Post Office. The P.O. clerk looked relieved to lighten the tote from box 441. You here for Mr. Dwyer? She asked. He forgets. I keep putting it back. It makes me nervous to have ghosts on the floor. I'm his cousin, Jessa lied, a small lie in service of a bigger truth. I'll deliver. Tell him Joyce says he owes me a Christmas card, the clerk said. He always used to send a postcard, mountains with little blue marks. Blue blazes. The tote was heavy with catalogs and a handful of real letters. Jessa sorted in her car. An invoice from a hardware shop, a typed note on San Juan Alpine Club letterhead requesting return of 3 keys, and a single envelope with no return, addressed in thin, careful loops. The postmark was yesterday. She put the tote on her passenger seat and traced the loops like a palm reader. The letters had librarian neatness. Add time for weather, Benton had written. Someone else had added time for mail. The address on the Alpine letter gave her the apartment. North Side, a faded green building that had been new when people believed avocado paint was a prayer. The hallway smelled like laundry and canned soup. She knocked. No footsteps. She slipped a card under the door. Call me, older than you think. And turned to go. The door opened 3 inches. You're not my cousin, a voice said. Neither are you, Jessa said. But you know my name. Through the slice of door he watched her like a deer that had learned which roads were kind. Early 40s. Beard like it remembered last winter. Hands with ground-in graphite. Nail beds dark from the pressure of sharp pencils. I listened to your show, he said. You take the long way around a question and the answer walks out to see what's going on. Kellen, she said. He didn't ask how she knew his name. He also didn't open the door. I didn't write the names last week, he said, quickly, like pushing a raft into current before anyone could stop him. If that's why you're here. Someone did, she said. 2 hands, same minute, same habit of crossing the 7, same pressure. Have you seen the book? Everyone's seen the photos. Did you once carry this book? She asked. In 2002. The hallway hummed. A neighbor's TV laughed without context. He breathed like altitude, even though they were at 7,100 feet, and he'd grown up here. I carried pages, he said finally, not books. Benton told me not to move boxes unless they were full. You carried a page, she said, softer. 3 months after a storm. The lock turned. He opened the door enough for her to slide in sideways. The apartment had the geometry of a person who filed life by pile. Stack of trail maps, stack of keys, stack of notebooks bound with blue tape. On the table, a wood block and sheets of tracing paper. A little press, a graphite bag, a bone folder. A fair kit, she said. It's a habit, he said. I copy the parts that will rot, so they don't. They always rot somewhere, she said. If they don't in the paper, they rot in the living. He sat across from her and rested his face in his hands, not dramatically, as if he had learned to do it without telling his body he was doing it. When I was 19, he said, I wanted to be a ranger. Benton said I could be a steward. He told me the books were bones and they needed setting, and I said yes, because when a person hands you a purpose shaped like a mountain, you hold on with both hands. Jessa waited. The recorder, small in her pocket, waited too. I went up the morning after the storm broke, Kellen said. Benton said check the box, make sure the lid's still there, see if anyone wrote before the weather came in. Sometimes that gives you a last time. Sometimes it gives you nothing. What did it give you? A page, he said. Loose, torn where the tack went through. There were names I knew, people I'd seen around. And then he swallowed like the air had grit. Rory and Nika. Time written. Not neat. Pressed hard like the pencil was a nail. They used the same pencil as the person above them. I could tell because the tip scored the paper. How did the page get loose? The tack was a bad angle. The wind takes what it wants. Did you take it? I didn't want it to blow off the hill and into a gully where a marmot would eat the salt, he said. So I put it in my bag. I meant to take it to the station. I didn't. Not right away. Why? Because on the way down I saw a thing I made, he said quietly. A mess I made because I wanted to be useful where I wasn't. He told the story in small parts. The way you tell a child how a storm works without making them fear the sky. That afternoon, 19 and lit by the hunger to do good, he had hiked up after the storm line softened. He had cut below the east arête to avoid rime on the blocks. In the couloir, he'd knocked a stone he thought was a stone and wasn't. It clattered down in leaps that sounded like laughter until it didn't. A shout rose from below. He ducked back, breath wild, heart in his throat like a fist. He saw them, 2 figures, halfway up, helmets on, moving together with that good rope-tight rhythm. The rock glanced off a ledge and carried a train of smaller stones with it. A petty avalanche of decisions. He saw the woman slip a half step, regain, then lose again. The man braced, rope taut, held. Then the second wave struck. They did what trained people do. They counted, they breathed, they waited. The mountain did what mountains do. It paid attention to nothing but gravity. I left. Kellen said simply, I left before I knew what I'd done, because the part of me that knew what I'd done couldn't live in my body with me. I left and I carried the page like a saint's bone. I took it home and wrapped it in waxed paper and put it behind the cereal, and I didn't sleep for 4 days. Then I called Benton. Jessa did not move. What did he say? He said we could set the bone, Kellen whispered. He said, did you see them sign? I said no. He said, then all you have is a page in your bag and a story you told yourself. He said, bring the page when you can carry it without shaking. I brought it 3 months later and he filed it. He initialed intake. He told me I had done a kindness. To whom? Jessa asked, not unkindly. To the weather, Kellen said. He said the mountain has to be something people can live near. He said if their names say they summited, the living can make sense of the shape of the grief. I wanted a world where that sentence was a mercy. And now? Kellen's hands flattened on the table. Now I get messages with photos of their names written in new hands, and my chest feels like it never learned to be a chest. He said, I didn't write last week, but I think I know who did. Who? Someone who was there, he said. Not at the couloir, at the book. There was a third hiker on Sparrow the morning they went up. He carried a cheap pole and a radio, and he wore blue tape on his knee. He passed them near the lake. He signed above them. I think about his 7 sometimes at night. I think about the way the graphite pressed harder on the downstroke, like he had to prove his own weight. Name. Trail name on his pack was Theo. He wore an RMCC patch. Rocky Mountain something something. He had a voice like gravel, and he said good luck like a man making change. Kellen looked at her. I think he wrote them again last week. Why now? Kellen breathed a shape that wasn't laughter and wasn't crying. Because people who set bones forget that bones take a long time to heal. Sometimes they never do. Sometimes the ache makes you pick at the cast. Jessa stood. I need your permission to record the part where you kept the page, where Benton told you to wait, where you saw the couloir. He nodded, eyes gone flat with that strange relief confession gives the body. I kept a copy, he said, and slid open a drawer. Inside lay a tracing of the 2002 page. Indentations captured like a fossil rubbing. The practice R, the crank of the 7, the hesitation before the loop of N. He had written at the bottom in his own hand, the one that slanted a little right as if leaning into wind. I meant to help, and I did not. I meant to carry, and I dropped. She photographed the tracing. She put the recorder on the table. She let him say it clean. When she left, the tote from the post office was lighter. She had handed him the letter with the careful loops. He looked at it like a person preparing to pick up a coal. Benton's niece, he said, or Dot, or someone who likes neat endings. And if it's Theo? Kellen shook his head. Theo doesn't write letters, he said. Theo writes on mountains. September 8th to 9th, 2024. Location, Lydia Parides' kitchen. Jessa's motel grief alters kitchens. Lydia's had no clutter, only what was needed. Kettle, 2 cups, a bowl of limes like small suns. On the table lay Nika's field notebook, the photocopy Jessa had returned, and a second, original one Lydia had not yet been willing to show. The paper had the translucence of onion skin. The edges had rounded where a backpack and years had softened them. She wrote something you missed, Lydia said, not unkindly. I missed it too, for 20 years. She turned to a page where a sketch of alpine forget-me-not took up the top left corner. At the bottom, in tiny script, false summits are still truth. They tell you where you are. She sent that voicemail, Lydia said. From just below a place like this, you can hear the water. Sparrow Lake overflow. People say it's wind. It's water. I know the sound. We camped there when she was 10. She fell in and laughed like a god. Jessa's hand lay flat on the paper, not touching. Do you believe she signed the book? I believe she would have, Lydia said. She liked to make marks where she stood, even when that mark would be washed away. Jessa told her about Kellen, sparely. You did not bring a mother more weight than the weight she already wore. She said, a boy carried a page he should have handed in because shame taught him to hide. She said, a man told him stories about mercy because guilt taught him to edit. She did not say rockfall or couloir, or the sound that rocks make when they learn a slope. Lydia's eyes told her she had said enough anyway. Will you tell me, Lydia asked, if you find where she stood last? Yes, Jessa said, even if the answer is lower than you were asked to believe. Lydia held her gaze. Truth is a place you can live, she said. Lies only look like houses. By afternoon, the ridge had shaken off its noon thunderstorms and gone into that long light that treats Talus like scales on some old sleeping thing. Jessa parked at the lake and climbed alone, recorder off. You don't record when you want a place to say something it wouldn't tell a stranger. You let the mountain forget the red light and give you a sentence for free. At the false summit, a lump of hope before the real edge narrows. Someone had built a cairn out of slabs, stacked with the neatness of a kid learning blocks. The top rock had a flatter face than the others. On it, a pencil shaving had adhered where rain had been not quite enough. Just below, wedged in a seam, a rolled thing no bigger than a cigarette. Her breath shortened, not altitude. She eased it out with tweezers from her kit. Old habit. The roll was waxy, water-shedding, a film canister strip used like a cartridge for words. She slid it into a bag and kept climbing, hands finding those positive holds climbers love because they look like generosity. At the top, she checked the box. Empty now, her own signature from a week past echoed only in the ledger in her head. The hasp bore a new nick. She photographed it. Wind pushed her a half-inch and let go. Somewhere a raven laughed like rusted hinges. Back at the lake, she sat on a warm boulder and unrolled the strip. Graphite lines revealed themselves like old bruises. The capital R practice. The 7 with a crossbar. 2 names, no year. And a third line, faint, in a different hand, smaller, a direction, not a signature, turn page. Kellen's words rung. Theo writes on mountains. He had written a direction to an invisible reader in 2002 or 2024. 1 turned pages, 1 edited time. The strip had been tucked below the false summit, not the true. False summits are still truth, Nika had written. They tell you where you are. The recorder took her words this time. If you stood here, she said to the lake water, if you signed below and later someone moved your names forward, the mountain knows. It keeps the first place. It keeps the false summits too. The motel smelled like cleaner chasing a smell it could only keep up with. Never beat. Jessa spread her finds on the bed. The film strip, photos of the hasp nick, Kellen's tracing, Dot's fair book images. She opened her laptop and mapped pressure points as if marking stars. The practice R on the strip matched the ghost on the 2002 page. The crossbar on the 7 matched a signature 4 lines above on that same page. Theo, trail name, which she now zoomed until the pixels surrendered the habit of his hand. Gravel voice. Blue tape on knee, cheap radio. The kind of man who leaves a breadcrumb because he thinks he's the only one who can find his way back. Her phone lit. A message from an RMCC forum handle she DM'd 2 days ago. A fossil of a website used by old-school hikers who liked arguments about root beta and purity. T-Protum. Saw your inquiry. Theo here, don't like journalists. But I like lies less. Don't call, meet. Tomorrow, 6:30 a.m., Sparrow Lake Spillway. Bring the book if you stole it. She stared at the words until the letters blurred. She answered, I didn't steal it. I logged it. I'll bring the photos. He read. He didn't reply. She lay back and listened to the heater click and the highway breathe and the memory of sleet in her mouth. You don't sleep well when the story stands up and asks to meet at dawn. You boil water and lay out layers. You pack rope you won't need because you'll feel braver for having it. At 6:05, she was parked. At 6:28, a man with a knee brace the color of painter's tape stepped out of the shadow of a spruce and leaned his cheap trekking pole against a rock. He did not offer a hand. He looked at her chest for a press pass and found none. He looked at her eyes for the thing that says a person will use your words, and he found that too and did not look away. Lake, he said, as if naming a feature on a map. You carry your name like it weighs something. So do you, she said. Theo. His smile was brief, a rock rolling once and stopping. You have my 7s dead to rights, he said. Let's talk about what I did and what I didn't. September 9th, 2024, dawn to midday. Location, Sparrow Lake Spillway. Theo poured coffee from a battered thermos and did not offer her any. He stared across the spillway where water slid flat as a blade before forgetting itself at the drop. The brace creaked when he shifted. You hungry? He asked finally, like a man offering truce in the only language he trusted. Not for what you bring, she said, then softened it. Tell me about the morning of May 26th, 2002. He spoke in the cadence of men who spend time alone. Short sentences, lots of geography. He'd started before dawn. Knee was good that year. Radio on his chest because everyone was paranoid after a late snow killed a couple on Red Mountain. He saw them at the lake, Rory and Nika, eating from a bag, laughing. They moved well. Young, strong, a rope coiled tidy. He signed and went ahead. I don't like crowds on ridges, he said. I figured I'd see them up top. I figured we'd trade photos. I figured wrong. Where did you sign? Jessa asked. Box was up top then, not side-mounted, Theo said. Old design. Lid always wanted to leave. I signed before clouds built. Weather had that metallic smell like coins in a mouth. I wrote my name. I wrote the time. I crossed my 7 like I always do because it keeps me honest. He glanced at her, a challenge. You like that word? I like that you think it can be written onto numbers, she said. He almost smiled. They came up later. I saw them on the arete, 6 minutes out. I moved to let them pass at the last block because you don't bottleneck where it narrows. She, Nika, touched the box with her glove like a hello to a dog. He pulled the lid. I looked away because I don't like to watch people write private things even when it's public. They took a minute. They wrote. They were neat. Are you sure? He shrugged. Neat enough for the wind in a glove. His jaw worked. People say they never signed. People say I wrote them in later. I did not. Did you write them last week? He picked up a pebble and rolled it across his palm. I wrote them last week because somebody else wrote them last week first, he said. And there it was. The twist the mountain had known and not told anyone. 2 duplicate entries were not one forger performing twice. 2 hands argued on paper. I saw the photo on the forum, he went on. Blue Blaze posted. I knew that hand. It was a fair book hand. Benton taught men like that to make things look like other things. So I went up and wrote what I saw that day because I don't like the feeling of someone taking my day and polishing it until it's theirs. Why call me now? She asked. He chewed the question with his molars like jerky. Because you move slow. Because you don't make heroes you haven't tested. Because the fair book is a sickness. What else did you see on the ridge? He stared at the north wall. I heard rock. Not big, not small. A sound like someone named it and a lot of other rocks followed the name, he said. I didn't see it. Weather ate visibility in one gulp, but I heard a shout that still lives in the place where night starts. Did you report it? He turned his head slowly. To who? A radio that makes some other man freak out and call a chopper into lightning? I got off the ridge, Miss Lake. I got to the trees. Then I called in that I was safe and saw no bodies, and I went home and I slept with my shoes on. Blue tape on the knee, she said. He snorted. You like details that make the math work. Was Kellen on the mountain the next day? At 19, a kid like that is everywhere, Theo said. He carried pencils like a priest carries oil. They walked to the east arete approach because words sometimes sit better when feet move. At the last safe ledge he stopped and pointed. The couloir lay to the right, like a throat. A fresh scar, only faintly green even after 2 decades, told of a slide path that had begun under a clumsy foot or a deceitful stone. That's where the mountain learned a new groove, he said. You can tell because the lickin' hasn't fully forgiven yet. Did you ever meet Benton? Once, Theo said. Twin needle. He told me my 7s were pretentious. He looked at her then and let the most tired part of himself show. You going to put me on a villain wall? I don't build those, she said. I build maps. You build stories, he said. But there was no accusation in it. Do me a kindness. Put the rockfall where it belongs. Don't put it on me if you can help it. I can help it by finding the boy who knocked it, she said. I found him. Theo's eyes went old. Is he in a jail that looks like his body? Yes, she said. And in an apartment that smells like graphite. Theo nodded once. Then you know, he said. Put Benton where he belongs too. In the place where people do the wrong kindness for the right reasons and teach other people to do it again. By 10, she was at the ranger station asking to log a chain of custody note for the Sparrow book with Mara's name on paper like a small prayer flag. Eddie, beard mossy, looked both terrified and thrilled. Vale told me to cooperate, he said, then added, because he was young and truth sometimes falls out of young men. He also told me not to like it. In the records room, she asked for the key log. Eddie slid a binder over, then hesitated and pulled a slim, unlabeled composition book from a drawer. We have the official, he murmured. And we have the thing Benton made me keep that I didn't want to, but he could make old ladies laugh, so I did. He pushed the composition book forward with one finger, as if it might bite. Inside, dates and initials. Not many. Blue blazes as a line item, a placekeeper for men who did not wish to be ordered by letters. At the bottom of the last page, a recent entry in a careful schoolteacher hand, BB-9/2-fair pull. Who writes schoolteacher? Jessa asked. Eddie's mouth twitched toward a wince. Dot logs for the club when we're lazy, he said. She hates it. She does it anyway. Says paper needs friends. She would not forge a summit, Jessa said. Dot would fix a comma on a gravestone if you let her, Eddie said. But she wouldn't lie about a day. When was the last key audit? She asked. Never, he said, then blushed. Or, I don't know. Who else has kits? He shrugged helplessly. Everyone who learned under Benton. Jessa photographed the composition book. She wrote in the margin of her notes, 2 hands, 1 belief. On the way out, she passed the trout mural and saw for the first time the boot print hidden in the rocks. A little outline kids pointed at and adults missed. She pressed her palm to the painted stone. Boots leave marks, even cartoon ones. Her phone buzzed. A voicemail filled the speaker with old tape hiss, and a voice like someone 2 rooms away whispering with a blanket over their head. Ms. Lake, a woman said. You don't know me. My name is Celeste Garner. I was on comms during Hart and Paredes. I heard 2 radios that day on the ridge. You'll want to hear the tape. September 9th to 10th, 2024. Location, Celeste Garner's house. Tape room, Silverton, Colorado. Celeste's living room had been turned inside out sometime in the last 20 years and made into a radio shack. Shelves of labeled cassettes. A rack with 2 handsets wired to a transceiver older than Eddie and twice as patient. The air smelled faintly of warm dust and coffee that had sat out and turned into a memory. I kept what they told me to erase, she said, her hands already knowing which box to pull. SJSAR, 2002. Sparrow Ops, raw. You can judge me for not shouting sooner, but I had a son in high school then, and I believed men who said lightning kills faster than truth. Jessa didn't judge. People never confess to a microphone that leans forward like a judge. She set the recorder at a respectful angle and nodded for Celeste to thread the tape. The machine clacked. The hiss of altitude lay under the voices like frost under grass. 1311 hours. Calm male voice. Bass. Ops check. Crackle. A younger man. Echo 1. E-1 copy at Sparrow Lake Outlet. No visual Easter egg due cloud. Another voice. Older. Tidy. The consonants placed like thumbtacks. Ranger 2. R2 on east approach. Standing by. Jessa glanced at Celeste. She made a small circle in the air. Wait. 1317. A third voice joined, tight, breath a little short. Steward Blue. Blue on trail below couloir. Got loose rock. 2 climbers below. Roped. Advise. Jessa's stomach went cold in a precise shape. Benton had written blue blazes like a signature. Here it was as a call sign. Steward Blue. Base again. Negative engage. Return to trees. Repeat. Clear the fall line, Blue. 1318. Echo 1. Copy loose rock. Visual negative. Radio traffic heavy near ridge. Recommend standby. Crackle. Another voice, gravelly, familiar to her now like a shoe that fits. Theo. Passing a rate block. 2 climbers at 20 yards, box in sight, weather metallic, will sign and move. A soft underscoring word from Ranger 2. Hold radio unless emergency. Standby order from Sheriff. 1320. A sound that the tape did not know how to translate except as a change in thickness. The rope of a day going taut. A shout, small, then smaller. A clatter like laughter until it doesn't. Silence, except for wind. Then Steward Blue again, voice hollow. We have rock activity. Do you want air? Base, faster now. Negative air, lightning in cell south. All units clear ridge. Repeat. Ranger 2 cut in. Stand by, Blue. If no visual, do not attempt contact. Theo, leaving arrête. No bodies. We'll update at trees. The tape rolled 3 more minutes of wind and a clock inside it that no longer belonged to anyone. Celeste stopped the machine. Their breath made a new weather. I logged it, she said. We kept it on the internal. Nobody outside ops heard. Sheriff signed the stand down. Benton came by with cookies that night and told me policies are bones too. Who was Ranger 2? Jessa asked, though she knew. The tidy consonants. The thumbtacks. Owen, Celeste said softly. 20 years younger, still him. And Steward Blue. Celeste lifted a shoulder. Could have been Kellen, but the voice reads older to me. Could have been any of the men Benton trained to carry pencils and swallow radios. One of them watched the loose rock happen and said nothing that changed the next 5 minutes, Jessa said. Celeste met her eyes without flinching. That's what stand-down orders do, she said. They make you complicit without touching your hands. Why keep the tape? Because the day comes when the mountain stops being the only place you can hear something you should have heard before, she said. And because my son is 39 now, and the people who made the orders are ghosts or retirees. On her way out, Celeste handed her a second cassette in a little cloth bag like a relic. Twin needle, 1986 raw, she said. If you want to hear Benton teach a club how to say fair without saying fiction. Jessa drove with the radio off, and the tape's wind still in her ears until she reached the edge of town where the road opened like a map into a valley that had learned to hold dozens of stories that never matched. Vale's garage door was closed when she pulled in, but he opened it within seconds. Like a man who did not want to pretend surprise today. I brought you something you already heard, she said, and set the recorder on the workbench. She played 1317 through 1320 and watched his face mount the ridge it knew was coming. He stood with his hands on the bench, fingers white. When the tape ended, he erased his eye with his thumb and smiled the way men smile to keep their mouths busy while their insides pick a different voice. I remember, he said, you were Ranger 2. Yes. Did you issue the stand down? I relayed it, he said. Sheriff called weather. Benton said the books would tell the story. And what did you say? I said clear the ridge. He looked at her then, all the way. It took me 15 years to stop hearing the shout in an aisle at the grocery store when a can fell. You set bones after, she said. I set what I could move, he said. Some of us use hammers because we don't know what our hands are for anymore. A beat. He reached under the bench and brought up a ring of keys. Hasp keys, box keys. The small, rounded kind a person used when he had memorized how locks breathe. I don't get to decide who holds these anymore, he said. Eddie will inventory. You tell him to change the screws on the sparrow hasp. The new tack angle is wrong. You didn't write the duplicate last week. I did not, he said. You already know who wrote one. Theo. And the other, he said, almost with tenderness, as if naming a flaw in a friend, was a person who still believes Benton's mercy was mercy. Blue blaze. He nodded toward the mountains like a man saying goodbye to someone who won't leave, even when you ask nicely. "The books are not the bones," he said. "It took me too long to learn that." It took a day to persuade the district office that a key audit would be framed as a state of the forest housekeeping rather than an indictment. It took an hour for Dot to show up with a legal pad and a look that promised she would punish commas that dared step out of line. It took 3 signatures and the thin smile of a county attorney for Eddie to open the cabinet that held the official set, and beside it, a cigar box that held whatever lived between official and useful. Jessa filmed each key laid flat under a ruler, each number circled, each gap noted. Eddie's forehead shone. "I can't fix yesterday," he said. "I can log tomorrow." At midnight, back at the motel, Jessa pressed play on the second cassette. Benton's voice filled the small room with a grandfather's patience and a mason's confident hands. "We keep fair books," he told a room of men who wanted to be useful, "because weather isn't literate and grief likes its verbs in the past tense." Jessa turned the volume down until his logic thinned and the tape hissed like sleet. She wrote in her notebook, "Policy is not penance." Then she drew 3 names: Rory, Nika, Blue. She drew 2 arrows backward from 2002 to 1986. She wrote 1317 to 1320 beside them, the minutes that had become an organ that everyone's body carried. She slept a little and saw a false summit hovering just below the first light. September 11th to 12th, 2024 occasion, Alpine Club Reading Room. The Alpine Club Reading Room hosted a peculiar sort of penance that looked like volunteerism. Dot had made a space at a table with a sign that read, "Register Audit. Public Welcome." A handful of older hikers came, most with stories about pages they'd salvaged in storms and sandwiches they'd shared with strangers who became lost 5 minutes later. A woman in a faded trail marathon shirt watched from the stacks with arms crossed like a gate. When Jessa approached, she unfolded a paper. "I'm not brave," the woman said, "but I'm tired." "Blue Blaze posted from this building last week." Dot snapped her eyes up. "Excuse me?" The woman slid over a print. A forum admin had emailed her after Jessa's inquiry, noting an IP block traced to the club's guest Wi-Fi. Timestamp, 2 hours before Mara went up to find the register tucked under a rock. The post, bones too visible. Moving down tonight. Keep faith, keep fair. A map pin. Dot's cheeks went the color of high-altitude sunburn. "The guest Wi-Fi is open," she said slowly, like learning you live with a door you never noticed. "We had a community board meeting that night. 14 people could have used it from the parking lot." "Did you?" Dot stiffened. "I would rather eat a page than lie to it," she said. "I logged BB Fair Pull because Eddie didn't have a box for someone replaced wet paper with dry, and I'm going to label it so a future librarian doesn't swear." She signaled for Jessa to follow and walked into the little back office smelling of toner and old laminate. From a drawer, she produced a small zip bag. Inside lay a sheet of paper with careful schoolteacher loops. A sign-out for a register copy done September 2nd, reason scan before mold, initials DB. "My sin is wanting to read things before they rot," she said. "My sin is punctuation." "Blue Blaze used your place to post a meet," Jessa said. "They have a sense of theater and a poor sense of who has security cameras." Dot blinked. "We do," she said. "A terrible one, but it remembers." The footage showed a parking lot in the blur of dusk. A figure moved in and out of the frame once, wearing a cap and a jacket a little too big, pausing by the glass to look at the bulletin board where the club posted trail work schedules and potluck sign-ups. The reflection sufficed. A long face, a beard. A body holding itself at the edges like someone trained to take up less space because space was a thing other people needed more. "Kellen," Jessa said. Dot exhaled like a person who had learned to like a boy, and then learned he was older and carrying something breakable. "He moved boxes for us when he was 19, she said. He still brings me pencils sometimes without saying hello. Jessa texted him. Tell me you didn't post Blue Blaze. The dots appeared, then vanished. Then, I posted the pin so I could get there first. To keep the book from the farers, I was going to bring it to you. Mara beat me. Good for her. A second text. I thought I could fix one thing I broke. Then, I'm at the false summit. Come if you want to make me say it out loud. Theo had already hiked half the approach by the time Jessa caught him. He moved like a man who had made a bargain with every old tendon in his body and who was now collecting on interest. He wants audience, Theo said, not cruel. Give him one. At the false summit, Kellen sat on the cairn like a kid on the step outside the principal's office. Textbook open because his hands didn't know what else to hold. The textbook was a notebook. The page was blank. He looked up with eyes that had learned to recede and failed at it. I left something here, he said. In 2002. I thought if it stayed, it meant they had stood where I stood. It was a marker for my cowardice. Maybe for their day. It was not my right to leave it. What did you leave? He reached into the crack where Jessa had found the film strip and pulled out a tin no bigger than a matchbox. Inside, a glossy square folded twice. He unfolded it with a care that looked like prayer. A Polaroid of the false summit, the first block of the arete. Nika's face turned 3/4, laughing at something out of frame, an index finger up like a conductor cueing the next measure. Rory's hand on the box's crossbeam. The pencil in his fist had no glove, the kind of detail you only notice when you are reaching for absolution. Timestamp on the film, Theo asked, all gravel, no softness. Kellen flipped the square. The chemical numerals were faint. 1406. They were here then, he said, voice thin. Not a 214 up top. He looked at Jessa. I wanted that to exist somewhere outside my head. Who took it? She asked. Theo, probably, Kellen said, surprising them both. He shrugged, small. Some people take little pilgrim photos at false summits. They don't register them as photos. They register them as proof. Theo's mouth made a shape like it might be a laugh if it remembered how. I don't shoot Polaroid, he said. But the kid's right on the other thing. False summits are where you prove you're real before the ridge tries to take it. And you left the proof and let a storm have the ending, Jessa said to Kellen. I let fear arrange the furniture, he said. No defense left. I signed my own name in secret and waited for a man with tidy consonants to file me away. Wind lifted 3 small stones and set them down inches away like a parent adjusting a blanket. Theo angled his face to squint at the cairn's top slab. You see that? He said. A faint graphite line, not words. The angle of a capital R practiced and abandoned. The earliest draft of a sentence that never wanted to be tidy. Jessa photographed the Polaroid with the sky as backdrop, her hand steadied against her knee. She recorded Kellen saying the time aloud. She recorded Theo saying he did not take the photo, and that men like him sometimes gather the proof of life and then walk away from the rest because the rest is heavy. She recorded the wind because the tape from 2002 had taught her that weather is a character, not a setting. Down at the trailhead, Mara waited by her Subaru as if she had always belonged to such grammar. You catch your blue blaze? She asked. We caught a boy with a key and a man with a brace, and a lie we can finally name, Jessa said. Mara's eyes were older than her a week ago. They're still up there, she said, chin at the ridge, as if being somewhere had ended when the ridge took the last word. Aren't they? They are in the minutes between 1317 and 1320, Jessa said, and in the notebook of a woman who can still hear a water. Then finish it, Mara said, or don't. Just don't let anyone ferret again. September 13th to 18th, 2024. Location, San Juan County Hall. The county set out folding chairs in a room that had only ever heard petitions about potholes and dogs. The crowd was bigger than potholes. On the wall behind the dais hung a faded topo of the district, a red pin marked Sparrow, like someone remembering a birthday. The moderator mispronounced Jessa's last name and said podcaster with the vague disdain of a person who believes radios should come with knobs only. She did not correct him. She was here to let the tape play for people whose lungs had spent years refusing to let go. She played the 1317 to 1320 segment. She watched faces change weather. A man in a bright volunteer t-shirt cried without sound. A woman squeezed his knee hard enough to blanch her knuckles. Lydia sat very still, her palms on her thighs as if pressing down a map. When the tape ended, there was a quiet that felt like complete sentences not yet written. Owen Vale took the microphone. He did not look like a man backing away. "We were taught to save lives first," he said. "We were trained to balance risk at altitude because a dead rescuer is one more story for a mother to carry. I relayed a stand down. I also let a practice grow that said pages could fix what we could not. That practice is over." Dot stood. "The club will no longer make fair books," she said, as if announcing she would no longer move commas without consent. "We will preserve pages as found, annotate with weather notes rather than corrections, and archive books with chain of custody. We will not be the story. We will be the shelf." Eddie, face pale but set, read the inventory of keys he had seized and the boxes he had re-tagged. "Any box without a current tag will be pulled and rehung," he said. "Hardware logs will be public. Volunteers will be named." "What about Blue Blaze?" a man called from the back, voice sharp with the energy that keeps people online at 2 a.m. "Blue Blaze was not a person," Jessa said into her mic. "It was a permission slip. We burned it." A woman in a ranger jacket the color of sage raised her hand. "What about the human part?" she said. "Do we charge the kid whose rock fell? Do we retire a ranger who followed orders? Do we put a blue brace on a hook like a trophy?" Lydia stood before anyone else could speak. "I want truth," she said, voice even. "I do not want blood in exchange for blood. I want a place to put my hands." That place came sooner than anyone expected. A cold front rolled through and brushed the ridge with rain that confident people called cleansing and cautious people called a rehearsal. The next morning, a dog team training along the talus line below the couloir signaled at a clot of alder. A whistle had snarled in the branches. Aluminum, scuffed, engraved with a line of letters worn to suggestions, NP. Jessa walked up with Dot. Dot because librarians know reverence where detectives sometimes forget, and watched Eddie bag the whistle like a dawn egg. Kellen stood 30 yards away, hands in the straps of his pack as if hands would otherwise leap free and touch things they could not afford to know. Lydia held the evidentiary photograph in Jessa's motel room later. The engraved metal fit into her palm like a thing made with her palm in mind 22 years ago. She breathed in a small, stuttering way, like someone trying to match steps on a staircase in the dark. "She kept it on a braided lanyard," Lydia said. "For bears," she said, "and for attention. She liked to make sound when she needed it." "You don't have to decide what it means," Jessa said. "It means that when the rock fell, she still had breath," Lydia said. "It means the last thing I picture is not a cliff at a distance. It is a whistle snagging an alder because something tore through lower than stories told me." Eddie called at dawn the next day. "We found an anchor scar in the couloir," he said, tired but young. "Old, not a bolt, a chalk. Could have been theirs. Could have been anyone in 2001, 2002, 2003. But it is a place where a rope wanted to be." Jessa wrote, "Place where rope wanted to be." She recorded an episode that cut between minutes and metal and the sound of Lydia putting the whistle down on her kitchen table and letting silence gather around it like a chair. When the episode went live, The comments split like weather cells, but without lightning. Some wanted charges. Some wanted saints. Most wanted the feeling of knowing to stop peeling skin. Kellen wrote her a note with the careful slant of a person trying to learn a new hand. I will be a volunteer who carries only down and never up. I will carry pages and hand them to Dot and Eddie while you photograph my hands so I cannot imagine I am invisible. Theo left a voicemail at 3 a.m. I'll sign my sevens without crossing for a while, he said, almost laughing at himself. Just so no one uses them to make a map. Vale met her by the trout mural and pointed to the boot print hidden in the rocks. It was there the whole time, he said. I never saw it until I stopped looking for the big shape and looked for where a child would point. Children are good at truth, Jessa said. So are mountains, he said, if you let them use the wrong word sometimes. September 21st to 23rd, 2024. Location, Mount Sparrow Summit, District Archive. She went up alone because there are parts of a story that don't like company, and because the air at 13,000 asks questions more politely when you come by yourself. The box was freshly tagged, the hasp reset at a cleaner angle, the brass tacks all of a kind. Inside, a new book, 2 pages of neat entries, a child's scrawl, I saw a goat, a line in block letters. We turned around, still beautiful. She did not sign. Or rather, she signed in her own ledger, the one no one could fare. She laid the matchbox tin back into the cairn crack with the Polaroid folded inside and a note in her square hand. False summits are still truth. If you find this, leave it. It belongs to the place. The ridge thought about weather and decided to let her down dry. In the archive that afternoon, Dot had begun a new shelf, Unfair Books. A small brass plaque explained the policy in 2 sentences children could read. These books live as they were written. Some pages are torn, some are wet, some are wrong. We keep them anyway. Eddie had built a ledger, this time the right one, that logged who touched boxes and when. Vale had retired without ceremony, leaving his ring of keys coiled in a drawer with a note. Leave bones. He visited the station less. And when he did, he stood by the boot print mural and spoke softly to no one in particular, as if saying sorry to a door. Kellen showed up Tuesdays and Thursdays with pencils in clear zip bags. He left them like offerings at a shrine where you no longer believe the god listens, but you still remember how to leave the right shape of gift. He never took a book off a mountain again. He never touched a hasp without a second person watching. When hikers asked what he was doing, he said, I'm helping the pages not blow away, and if they talked, he did not interrupt. He had learned to leave air around other people's sentences. The whistle came back from the lab with an opinion, not a verdict. Letters matched the engraving on a birthday locket in a photo Lydia provided. Metal age consistent with early 2000s outdoor kits. Alder pollen on the cord. Human skin cells too degraded to give comfort. Evidence speaks in probabilities. Grief accepts the grammar. Lydia made tea and set the whistle on a folded dish towel as if it needed rest. Jessa stood at the counter because sitting felt like asking the chair to hold one more thing. They asked me if I wanted a service, Lydia said. I don't know how to hold a service for a whistle. You hold it for a time, Jessa said. 1317 to 1320. Lydia smiled, tired and exact. We are not bones to be set, she said. We are weather, and sometimes we write ourselves on paper. They ate small cookies because hands need tasks when mouths do not. Lydia asked for the Polaroid. Jessa told her where it lived now. Lydia nodded. Good, she said. Let it look out at the sharp place. On her way out, Jessa stopped by the ranger station to sign a clean piece of paper no one would fare. A request for public posting of the key audit and the end of the fair book practice. The clerk stamped it with a satisfying thud that felt like policy choosing to be penance. At the motel she cut audio, weaving tape hiss and raven calls and Dot's dry humor and Kellen's quiet wreckage. The wind from the 2002 cassette stepping down into the wind from last week, like a parent matching a child's stride. She recorded the ending in one take because endings prefer not to be rehearsed. Fiction is a mercy we give each other when the facts have teeth. But mercy is not the same as truth. The register was signed twice because a place tried to be fair and a person tried to be honest, and another person tried not to be alone. Between 1:17 and 1:20 on May 26, 2002, a sound changed the shape of 3 lives and a mountain. We can name the minutes, we can change policy, we can hold a whistle, we can stop pretending paper can decide who reached the top. Her phone buzzed with a text from Theo. Saw your ending. You didn't make me a villain, you made me a minute. That's fair. Then another from Eddie. First unfair book on display. Kids love the boot print. And one from Mara. Signed, turned around today. Felt like telling the truth is something I can actually do. Night settled without a storm. She slept without hearing rockfall for the first time in a week. December 1st, 2024. Location: Lydia Paredes' kitchen. Snow had written new lines on the mountains and made them look earnest. In Lydia's kitchen, the radiator clicked like an old metronome. She took from her mailbox an envelope with no return address and a faint chemical smell. Inside, 2 rubbings. Pencil shade on thin paper, the way children lift leaves in autumn. The first rubbing showed the faint relief of Rory Hart and Nika Paredes in soft, hasty strokes. The second showed the ghost of a practice R and a direction in smaller hand. Turn page. No note. No plea. Only the rubbings, like a promise that someone had learned the difference between setting and stealing bones. She thumbtacked them above the kettle where steam could find them and think kindly. She brewed tea. She did not cry. Weather requires water. Grief had enough. Up on Sparrow, the box slept under a lip of rime. The new book's first pages were unremarkable, which is to say they were the right kind of remarkable. Couples wrote stunning and harder than I thought. Children drew goats. A solo hiker wrote turned around, still beautiful, in large letters and underlined still. No one had written Rory and Nika's names again. The film strip and the Polaroid lived in their crack like a tiny museum that belonged to rock, not people. At her desk, Jessa drafted the episode page. Credits, sources, an explanation of the chain of custody change that Dot and Eddie had nudged through like a heavy sled. She pinned at the top a photograph of a new shelf in the Alpine Club. Unfair books in clean type, and beneath it a hand-lettered card in Dot's neatness. Some pages are wrong. We keep them anyway. She thought of all the ledgers that had pretended to be the story. She thought of the wrong ledger someone had told her to look at. She thought of the right one, never bound, never archived. A mother's calendar with nothing after a date, and then everything, eventually, after it. She clicked publish. The internet made one of its microscopic waves and broke against a handful of phones, and then 100 and then more. Somewhere, a man with a knee brace smiled and went to pack for a dawn that didn't need him. Somewhere, a retired ranger put his hand on a mural and let a boot print be a boot print. Somewhere, a boy with graphite under his nails left a pencil in a bag and wrote his full name on a volunteer form with the practiced care of new handwriting. Winter pressed its clean weight on the ridge. The books held what they could. The rest lived where it always had, in air that remembers voices, and in minutes that do not forget being counted.